everybody to the networking session on programme management. This session is being recorded just to make you aware, and it will be available on the platform. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're happy to have your cameras on, it'd be fabulous to see your faces, but at the same time, if you'd rather not, that's okay. Can I ask that mics are kept muted where possible, but do raise your hands during the discussion part or chip in using the chat function. Both will be facilitated. I thought we could start off with a couple of introductions before we move on to the session. So my name is Parampreet Bhaiya, but I go by the name of Pam, and I'm quite happy with being called Pam as well. I'm a pharmacy technician and a pharmacy programme facilitator with Health Education England. I've got a range of programmes and projects that I manage and work on, but I'm also one of the NHS Project Future Champions, and I'll be facilitating today's session with Joe and Liz. Joe, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Yes, hello. You probably heard enough from me already today. So I'm Joe Stanford. I head up the Corporate Portfolio Office at Health Education England. I've done that for 8 years now. Prior to that, I was a programme manager at the Department of Health, a programme project manager, and prior to that, I worked in the private sector as a project manager, working in logistics and distribution. And if you wanted to go way, way, way back, I started life as a lighting designer in the theatre. Just to say, it's a little bit different, and I quite like running these events because it's like having a production. It's good fun. So that's me. So I volunteered to do, having done all three at some point in my career, I decided I would volunteer to do the programme management session. So introductions in the chat.
Yes, please. So this session is going to be interactive. So to start off with, we'd like you to introduce yourselves in the chat using the chat function. You know, state your name if you're coming up as unknown. Teams does that at the moment. All my Teams chat is unknown meetings today, so not sure what's going on there. If you can just state your region, your organisation and your role, and if you're happy to, if you could share any programmes that you're working on at the moment. There is a likelihood that somebody is working on something similar, and it's a perfect opportunity to share resources and experiences. It's okay.
And whilst you're taking a minute to all fill that in and write that out, I'll tell you a little about the programme I'm working on at the moment. Well, I've got two. So the first one is obviously development of the project profession. So project profession program's been running for 5 years now, 6 years going on, and it's a strange one because we don't have a sponsor other than the heads of profession, and we collectively are the beneficiaries of it. So it's a bit of a weird one, but we use all the usual program management things with it, and we deliver it using Cube. And the other program I lead on is an internal program. So we have a new chief exec in HE, and I'm leading a program to improve program project management in HE, particularly capability at all levels, particularly at the top, which is where the biggest gap is. So interesting what everybody else is up to.
Fab, thank you. Liz, do you want to share any programs that you're working on at the moment?
Hi, yeah, well, I suppose because I'm in a slightly different position because I'm head of a PMO, so essentially it's an overview of everything that's happening in our Lincolnshire system at the moment. So there's an awful lot going on, and we're actually going through a process. It's a whole system improvement plan piece of work. So it's quite an intensive piece of work over the next 6 weeks where we're going to prioritise a number of programmes and projects, because essentially we recognise we've got far too much going on to ever deliver any of it. So we're having a bit of a rationalisation of that. So yes, but there's all sorts obviously going on in Lincolnshire.
Thank you. So I'll stop talking in a moment and I will hand over to Joe to kind of deliver the session. But the purpose of today's session is to get an understanding on the definition of programme management and introduce you to any additional resources and training that's available. But we'd also like to take this opportunity to identify challenges and lessons from you. So do share within the chat and the discussion stages. OK, Joe, over to you.
OK. So I just wanted to do a kind of quick overview of program management. So stick your hands up if you are a program manager or working as a program manager. OK. And if you aren't working as a program manager, are you interested in finding out? If you're interested in finding out more about program management and what it is, stick your hand up. Okay, awesome. If there's anybody that's not in either of those two categories, if you stick your comment in the chat in terms of, are you in the right place? Is this what you were hoping for? And if there's something in particular you want to find out about, stick it in the chat. Because what I was going to do was do a really brief kind of overview of program management and where it sits sort of within project management and portfolio management, and what the sort of the role of the program manager entails, and some of the things around the resources that are available to support delivery of programs, but also to support the development of capability deliver programs. I think it's quite a pertinent one given the session that Gordon delivered, because a lot of program management is actually about leadership. It's less about the doing and it's more about the facilitating change to happen, a lot of negotiating. In fact, the last one with the risk session as well, where you're dealing with the aliens. Sometimes the aliens could be your SRO, they could be some of your stakeholders. So some of that stuff is really good as a program manager being able to look at how would you go about tackling it, because it's very different from project management, which is more about product development or developing resources and things for people to use. So if I share my screen, and we'll briefly go through that. What I'll do is I'll share some of the resources that we've got for this session, which will hopefully be helpful and useful to folks. So as a starting point, we've got the APM body of knowledge. Now, the APM body of knowledge is it's actually a really good book to read. It might sound a bit dry, but it's actually really well structured. It's the 7th edition, which has been really kind of rewritten, and it looks at all of the kind of content. So life cycles, different kinds of project life cycles. It gives overview of governance, sustainability, um, program management, project management, portfolio management. So in terms of a kind of go-to resource to go and find out what's going on, that's the best place to start, to really just get the definitions right and see what's in there. So as well as having the obviously the document that is the sort of project management Bible. Hey, Robert. And all of the sort of information contained in there. We've also included in the platform quite a few resources that will help to support your understanding of program management. So as well as the body of knowledge, we have in there, we have the, let me find it. There is the P3M3, if you're familiar with that, the Portfolio Program and Project Management Maturity Model, hence the 3 Ps and the 3 Ms. The guide and introduction talks about the various levels and various elements within that. There is a project management model, a program management model, and a portfolio management model, which is very handy, which I have, let's see, is very useful for identifying what it is you perhaps need to do in terms of setting standards around program management. So whilst the APM body of knowledge sets the kind of the definitions and the some of the approaches to it, the program model then looks at how you assess your level of maturity in relation to it. And the maturity levels it covers are the same for each of the different types. So the first one looks at management controls, and it's got levels 1 to 5 in terms of maturity, and you can assess yourselves against it. There's a self-assessment questionnaire also in the documents. And what it does is it sort of puts it into context. So it sort of says, well, level 1 in terms of management control at program management level is program management terminology is used by some members of the organization, but not consistently, and possibly not understood by all stakeholders. Programs are conducted and managed according to individual preferences. So from an organizational maturity point of view, it says, well, that's level 1. There's some level of knowledge and competence, but it's not consistent, and you know, people are allowed to kind of go about it in their own way. There isn't an organisational standard. And then when you look at the level 2, 3, 4, and 5, it then sort of builds that up over time. So I'll jump to level 3. So level 3 management control, there is a centrally defined and documented approach to a program management lifecycle and controls. And it is applied in all programs by capable staff who support program teams. So obviously that's a pretty big step up. We use this organisationally for our corporate portfolio office maturity assessment every year. And our holy grail is to get to level 3. Level 5 is a myth because of cultural and organisational politics and other pressing factors. So if you're getting to level 3 on anything, you're doing pretty crackingly good well. And we haven't, because, you know, the organisation appetite for some of it is what impacts on it. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't aim to improve it. So the maturity model can help you understand what are the areas of program management improvements. And then the self-assessment is a questionnaire that sort of help you keep track of it. So I think that's a useful resource, and it tells you how to go about doing the assessment as well. So you can either do it for yourself as a team, but you can do it for your organization as well if you're working in a PMO, looking at the program management approach for the organization. We also have some other useful resources in the documents list for this session. APM's Introduction to Program Management. So that's building on what's in the body of knowledge document. Again, useful kind of core knowledge and basics. It takes you through standards. Now, the thing is, program management, if we define it, is really about looking at if projects are about products and outputs, programs are about outputs, outcomes, and changes that are things like behavioral change and changing the way things work. I think a really great analogy for differentiating between a project and a program is if you look at the Olympics, the project park, where you've got the venue, the buildings, the access, the trains or the buses coming in and out, the tickets, all of that stuff. That's a very complex project because that's about products and things. The Olympics, when we had them in 2012, the program was around changing public perceptions of exercise. It was around sustainable investment in athletic achievement and building on it. So when you look at the programs are usually a lot longer, and it's more about how you change how things work. So the program might have a number of projects underneath it because you're developing some products to support it. But the program is about how the system change then absorbs and makes that change happen. Welcome, Lucy-Anne. Good to have you with us. So I think one of the other areas that I thought would be particularly useful is we've got an awful lot of cross-organisational programs happening at the moment, and a lot more cross-organisational working. So the APM also has a governance of co-owned projects, which from a project or program management point of view, the whole thing about co-owned is probably the bit that's of use and interest, so worth having a look at. Another thing in terms of resources to support, we have the Axelos online subscriptions. And we've had this created, which gives you really just an overview of all of the best management practice guides that are available, but also it gives you the login details. So that's also attached. So this is worth sharing with your colleagues and your project community in your own organization as well, because we pay for a subscription license for this. The more people that use it and access it, the better value we get from people logging into it. And when you log in, you get into the subscription pages. And for program management, so the APM has a guide to program management, and there is also an Axelos Managing Successful Programs guide. And this is the 5th edition. This has recently been rewritten, and it has been radically changed to really reflect the kind of changing world we're in. So it's much more VUCA based. So it's has adaptability and agility built into it. If anybody came to the festival, in February. One of the speakers that we had was Ruth Murray Webster, and she was the author of this guide. And everything that you would get by going on the course is in the content of this. So you don't need to go on an expensive course if you don't want to, but if you just want to learn how to do programs more effectively, all of it is in here for free. And then if you want to, you can go on the course and get your certification and then go, look at me, I'm certified. Okay, so that was really just to give you a kind of overview of some of the resources that are available to support program managers. I'll very momentarily just mention, so the other thing that we do is, obviously you guys have all seen Cube and know what we've been doing to some extent in Cube. So this is my cubicle for the PPM improvement program that I've got running at the moment, and this is where we manage it. So I think the thing about program management is partly about how you manage it. So what's the methodology that you use? How are you going to coordinate it? What's the best way of doing it? It's also about how you work collaboratively, and this is how we work collaboratively on that program. And then it's about the skills and abilities to be able to manage it effectively. And that's the other bit, is around capability development. So as well as obviously the Axelos guides, which gives you the resources and the link to the resources, we also have in the documents, it should be in here, there's a whole list of stuff I put in here. The learning prospectus, which then gives you a link to all of the courses that are recommended to go with the capability framework that says, as a program manager, here are the competencies you should have. Here are some learning and development opportunities that link to that help you develop that level of capability. So I will stop talking there and then sort of open it up and just say, oh, there we go. There's the link to capability framework. So mindful, some people might have been involved in other sessions that we've run and be aware of it, and some might not. So Pam,
Yeah.
Where do you want to take this next?
I was going to say Christine's had her hand up and I wasn't sure what was the question. Christine, do you want to just unmute?
Is it a legacy hand or is it a
I'm
question?
sorry, it is, yeah, sorry.
Hey there, no, it's inevitable.
That's okay.
Sit down.
I guess, does anybody have any challenges that they've encountered or are aware of as being program managers or within the role of program managers that they're happy to share?
So stick your hand up if you've got a question, or stick your question in the chat otherwise. Paula?
Paula?
Yeah, I don't mind giving some feedback in my role. So I think obviously as a program manager, you know, you sort of think the next step in your sort of career, isn't it, is you go sort of project manager, program manager, and up the scale. In terms of organisations, though, I don't think they understand the difference in any of it whatsoever organisationally. So I would say that I am business change, program manager, project manager, change manager, PMO manager, and trying to, like, I keep saying to people that they refer to me as the PMO, and I'm like, I'm not a PMO. So yes, you are a PMO. No, I'm not a PMO. If you look at a PMO manager, their job description is not mine and their responsibilities are completely different. However, we've amalgamated them completely into one. So I am all of those things you said in terms of managing a PMO. I've asked, you know, can we take the PMO title out of my team is the project management office. We are not a project management office either. We're only a very small team. I have one project manager, me as a program manager, and as business change benefits lead, and I have an admin, and that's it. But that is not what a PMO is. And so for me, I think that's the challenge, is that the project management is very much a big buzzword at the minute, the same as business change. So it's like the new last 12 months is, wow, you know, we need a PMO. Everybody wants a business change. Benefits is like the buzzword of this month, I think, benefits realization, all this stuff. But that's my biggest challenge, is like people actually understanding the importance of each role and how I think that links back in terms of like the risk and stuff as well. It's like we obviously manage our risks, and we manage them old school in an AirCal. We have not invested in a PMO system. Is really frustrating because it does feel very old school, and communication is a massive thing, and it's hard to communicate virtually via Excel spreadsheets and so on. But in terms of like risk, obviously we put them on the risk register for our projects and our programs, and we feed them to digital committees and other things. However, my responsibility is not corporate risk. The actual department owner should be responsible for corporate risk. So I believe that my role is to highlight risks to whoever I'm delivering projects for. So for instance, I'll use maternity. So we'll say to our maternity services, right, okay, we've done a risk assessment, you know, we've identified this, we've done that, but we've always been educated that the projects don't put things on a corporate risk register. The departments put it on a corporate risk register because it's their department. So I highlight a lot of things to maternity. I create a risk register and update with maternity, but it's then maternity who should then identify clinically which of those are their department organisational risks. I do if it's IT related because we're digital, so I will put it on our IT risk register. But in terms of clinical services, we put them on. And again, I think that's the misunderstanding. It's like, well, it's not being put on a department risk register, but I'm not your department.
Yes.
So and there's that ownership is a massive problem. Same with benefits, same with risk, and even the projects. Nobody will own anything. So I've from like the last week, we've just put part of the trust's overall agenda was to improve its sort of, you know, customer facing, patient facing services, and one of those was telephony. I've become the telephony trainer, the account creator, and I'm like, I'm not even the project manager, you know, like, and that's, so all of that, it's like ownership and understanding of actual roles is my biggest frustration. And that's why when I first joined the chat, I said, can we please use this forum to write the NHS methodology and hand this book to trust, because Prince doesn't fit and other things don't fit.
No,
we have our own way.
Well, and again, I think there's some really good points there. And some of what we're doing or attempting to do is to create some consistent frameworks. And that's not to say that it's going to be this how people do it in each organization is going to be the same, because it's always going to be different. But things like the capability framework, which is around having standard descriptions of roles and competencies, and looking at promoting training and development linked to that, I think is really quite critical. Having frameworks around PMO, so we've got a PMO toolkit, and we've also got a PPM toolkit, and I was going to share that with you, but the version I've got isn't accessible. It's been locked down for some reason. But and again, some of the thing about us working collaboratively is then about how we ensure that the organizations have similar sorts of things in place, so that they read across and they're using similar kinds of language across the different organizations. So I think the community to work together on that. So one of the things is who sets the standards for the organization, because if that's not owned by anybody, then you've got a potential gap. So going back to that maturity model, if you haven't got somebody who sets the organizational approach to, you know, program project management standards and methods and policy and training and development, then you're not going to get that consistency. So I think some of it's about identifying where the gaps are, and what we can do to support the organisations to put those in place. When I first arrived in HE, it was brand new, set up 8 years ago as part of the Lansley reforms, and I came across and I wasn't head of the portfolio office then. I came across as a senior program manager, and I was like, right, so where's your program management standards? Where's your templates? Where's your guidance? How does it fit with corporate risk management? How does it fit with, you know, financial decision making? They're like, we haven't thought about any of that. Do you want to do it? That might not sound a very glamorous way to end up in this job, but that's how I ended up in this job, because they didn't know that they needed it and they didn't know what to do about it. And they're like, well, if you can do it, you do it. I suspect probably a lot of organizations perhaps still haven't had that conversation and go, do you have somewhere that is setting the organizational standards that everybody understands, and therefore you go to them for, you know, here's the organizational approach. I think the other thing is we collectively need to educate everybody else on what program project management is. I think it needs to be mandatory training. in terms of the basics. So, you know, I've been asked to do a presentation for the APM, actually their Women in Project Management conference, which is the week of the 20th of September. It's free if you're a member, or it's dirt cheap if you've got our corporate membership. It's a week long, it's worth going to. But what they've asked me to talk about is how you engage or how you influence senior people to get this sort of on board. And some of it's about lessons we've learned, but actually some of it's about actually getting right to the top. So getting it, we had a new chief exec, and it was getting to her as she came in going, you do realize that any of these big, you know, government programs go wrong that we're delivering, you're the one that's going to have to appear in front of the Public Accounts Committee to explain why. I want to send you on a 2-day course at Cranfield around senior program leadership so that you understand what your SROs and your exec sponsors should be doing, so you have the confidence to know whether they're doing it properly or not, which she did. And then she came back and goes, we're not doing very well, are we? I'm like, no, we're not. This is an opportunity to influence that, which is why we now have an improvement program. So you know, some of it's about ideas for how we influence it. Christine?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few years ago, we had a really effective program manager in post running the PMO, and she coerced the board into all undertaking MSP training.
Okay.
So the whole exec team undertook the training.
Interesting.
And the difference it made was when I compare it to now, the difference is absolutely amazing. They had respect for project managers and what they did. They really embraced the programs. They understood what their role was, so they were there straight away to, you know, help you unlock blockages and things like that. And to be honest with you, during that time, it was the most productive period in our organisation's history of delivering projects and programs, in my experience, and I've been with them 20 years. And they don't do it now. Working with people who think they know what a program manager, you know, think they know what a program is, think they need what they need a PID for. So we're recruiting some staff. Can you do a PID? Like,
yes.
No.
Yeah.
And it's just really, really hard work. And I just think if you've got any influence with boards up and down the country to, like you said earlier about mandatory training, but I think as an exec's development, part of their development pathway, MSP has got to be a must, you know, or something like it.
Yeah. I think there's actually a gap. I think there's a real gap in training availability for SROs, because and MSP is really useful because they start to understand the process and what the whole kind of life cycle is about and what should be done by whom and when. But ultimately, these people are never going to be program managers. They're going to be the decision makers, and they're going to be the SROs. But I think there's a real gap around training of SROs. Interestingly, the IPA, so the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, has clearly cottoned on to this because they're in the middle of developing an SRO competence assessment process at the moment, which will put the cat among the pigeons when they start to be assessed for their competence. Now, I don't know about your lot, but my lot are self-taught because there isn't really a huge amount out there. Now, there is stuff on the IPA website for SROs, and you know, we're slightly getting off track in terms of program management, but the point is we can't do program management well if the environment isn't in a good position in order to enable it to work effectively. So we've got to deal with some of these other things at the same time, which is all the people who don't understand what it is we're trying to do. So let me also include the link to, in fact, was the IPA link on the website? No, it wasn't. Because again, there's guides for SROs, but the fact that they're going to be doing assessments, and that's going to start to cascade down. So having got my chief exec to go on a 2-day course along with my boss, who's the chief operating officer, she's then now, you know, really kind of flying the flag for it, which means all the execs are all feeling under pressure. So, and again, tactically, just between the whole group of us, one of the things I picked out was a supportive champion. So somebody who's not an ambassador, actually. So they're not a project professional, but they're an SRO. so leading the Nursing 50,000 program. And he's actually a neonatal intensive care nurse by background, but he's a very sensible chap who knows what he doesn't know. So I do coaching with him in his role as SRO, sent him on a 6-week Oxford Side Business School course on leading complex programs, which he had to write an essay every week, which he found rather daunting. But what it did was it gave him a real proper understanding, and that meant I can get him to then influence his peers, because not everybody listens to me because they go, you just do projects. Whereas nurses listen to nurses, clinicians listen to other clinicians. So starting to influence, it's who's that sympathetic friend at a more senior level that you can get on board that can do the flying of the flag for you, and also suggesting to others. I'm also about to get our Chief Nursing Officer onto the Major Projects Leadership Academy, because I know he's fiercely competitive and would quite like to be seen to be leading the way. And he also suggested that he was the only one in his team who hadn't had training, and we wanted them to be an exemplar, and therefore it would be good for the organisation if he would do that. So this might sound a bit diabolical, but the point is a lot of what we need to do is influencing others. And we have, funny enough, going back to Gordon's thing about we have very little direct control over how these things are planned and managed. Some of it's about leveraging the influence to say, actually, what is it that they care about? What is it that they want to see happen? And how can we support them with that by getting the right things in place? So who else? Who else has got some ideas? And I think one of the things that we can do is if there's suggestions for what we can take away collectively to do as actions, but also what can we maybe produce that can support development of the wider system to enable it, shout out or put your comments in the chat, because we want to take some actions away from this. Paula?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask, I think already a massive information sort of, I wouldn't say overload, but like you've shared information and documents and just briefly touched on even courses and sessions that are out there. Now, I came across this forum by complete accident. So it was mentioned and I went away and Googled it. So to me, it's not, though there's a lot of people here, things aren't very well publicized. And it's, you can only know what you know. And I think what would be really useful, especially from you, Joe, of what you've touched on, is you've mentioned places, websites and forums and courses, and they're outside of the bog standards, you know, agile program management stuff. And that would be really, really useful to know of ways to go. And especially when funding is a big deal, if there's like, you know, your project management office staff and things like that, of where they can go and research and maybe do some self-development of possibly free, because obviously it's very difficult to get support. That would be a massive big turn, because yeah, you've mentioned so many things already that I'm trying to write them down. I'm like, I got this and what's this, and I don't know what that is.
Well, so I think probably one of today's really key documents to take away, let me go back in, is one of the things that people asked for was a one-pager that sort of summarized everything that we were sort of doing in relation to the development of the project profession. And did we include it in here? It's definitely in session 1 guide, because I introduced it at that session. But if we go into that and have a look in the documents, there's also, it's starting to play it. Hang on. How efficient are they? They've already got session 1 already up in the on the platform. In the session 1 documents, there's some really key documents in here for promoting it with other people. And this is what we've just produced, which is a one-pager that summarizes what Project Futures is in terms of supporting project and change professionals and practitioners in the NHS. So it's got everything in here in terms of links to the events. There's an update newsletter. If you're not on the newsletter checklist, you need to log it, connect to that, because that's where we promote what's going on. I think the other thing is core skills online learning. So we have developed 5 of those, links to the APM. So there's a whole load of stuff, and the best place to start is with this one pager, because this is signposting to all the key things, and join up here but also Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube channel. So I think that's the starting place. We know when we did the research, 2019, there's about 10,000 people with project program, PMO, change, and so on in their job titles across the NHS. We've connected in with about 1,200 so far. The problem is we don't know who the rest of them are, and they don't know each other. So we thought we would go out to the regions and our regional kind of contacts and networks and go, right, so who's in your region? They're like, we don't know. Because they didn't have those relationships built yet. So we've been having to do it the hard way. But the problem is we don't know who we don't know. So in terms of organizational contacts and heads of functions, or people who can help to connect in their organizational project community, that's an ongoing kind of challenge for us to try and fill that directory of contacts. But that's what we're aiming to do. Rachel, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, it was just going back to the comment you were making about, sort of big issues locally. And I think possibly because of where we're at the moment is we just set up a massive transformation and efficiency portfolio with 15 programs in it, which works across the whole of our integrated care system. And I would say from a PMO perspective at the moment, the biggest challenge we've got is getting people to understand that difference between a project and a program. We've got some program managers who are trying to run a giant project and no one's looking on outcomes and changes. And then we've got project managers trying to run mini programs, and that's causing all sorts of issues.
Yes. Yeah. And again, some of it's about definition, some of it's about the capability, the learning, isn't it? So it's not actually all in here because we've got some of it in Miro. But yeah, as a program, what we have is set up the projects within the program. And then for me, it's a bit of a fuzzy one, but so I've got some key projects and links to external projects that are other improvement things going on elsewhere, and looking at the critical interdependencies between them. And one of the things about being clear about what the roles and responsibilities are at program level, for me, my view is that I'm not there to deliver the content. I'm there to deliver all of the engagement across the organization, connect up the different programs and projects, make sure the interdependencies are there, make sure people are engaged, but primarily start with why. What does it look like at the end? So doing the benefits, looking at the kind of strategic risks, interdependencies, and then sort of overseeing how that's managed across the projects and how they intersect with the rest of the organization. So what would you suggest? What would you like to see happen, Rachel, in terms of improving the knowledge and skill around program management and the differentiation so people are clearer about what they're doing?
I don't know. It's kind of a bit of a tricky one, really, because we can't get people onto apprenticeships to give them that kind of level of knowledge like we can with project management. And I think the appetite for going and reading the Act Loss manual would be quite low. I don't know how we get that training into them. I mean, we've just set up a capability development program for the system in recognition of all of this, and that is going to be one of the first products that we're going to need to define is how are we going to bridge that gap. And to be honest, I don't have an answer for it. It's a really tricky one.
So I mean, in terms of program management, the guide's one thing, but the point about learning how to do program management is potentially you can go on a course and you can become certified at it. And I think this is where I'm really keen that we are seen to be professionalizing project management, the profession, because at the moment, anybody can call themselves a project manager, anybody can call themselves a program manager. And I don't know about you guys, but we have an awful lot of people who are subject matter experts who are given the programs and projects to do that have no program project management knowledge at all. And therefore, they just do content stuff because that's the stuff they know.
Yeah.
There's no planning, there's no governance, there's no risks or benefits or evaluation, or because they don't know that stuff. So what do we do to shift the perception and the understanding that the profession, project management, program management, PMOs, portfolio management, are professional, and therefore a bit like accountants. You can't call yourself an accountant because you've got a budget. You might be a budget manager, you might need some core skills in budget management, but that doesn't make you an accountant. And having a first aid certificate doesn't make me a clinician. And this is some of the perception stuff we need to get across. Joan's got a hand up. Well done for, chipping in there, Joan. Sorry for keeping you waiting.
It's all right. Joe, thanks so much for going through all of this. And I think because I started HEA last October and I've had immense support, to be honest, and having this discussion is kind of raising those concerns I had when I started. But I'm thinking now, when you're asking for what we could do professionally, and I'm thinking, is there an opportunity for shared learning? You went through that maturity measures. So definitely there are places where you have 3, which you alluded to, and probably higher. Will there be opportunities for those just coming into the role to probably shadow or be part of a team where it's working well temporarily, just to learn a few things, understand the documentations, understand that's just my thought, an opportunity for shared learning, within organizations. But then, of course, we can't take out the need for skills development, training where is required. But then I think an opportunity as well to see, okay, it's working well in this organization, it's working well in this team. What can we take out from there? But we need to know where it's working well first. That's what I think.
Yeah, so that's definitely one angle we can take. And what we can potentially do is put on a lunch and learn session, which brings together people who have developed maturity in certain areas around project program portfolio management, and maybe do 3 separate ones, and learn from what's worked well and what hasn't. Now, when I said about the level 3, actually, our biggest challenge in HEE is, and let's be honest, we get this kind of wherever you go, is there are some cultural barriers to everybody adopting the same approach, because somebody will say, oh, well, we're different over here, we have to do things differently because we're unique. And you go, no, we're an organization. Having a consistent framework for programs and projects doesn't stop you being an individual. It just means you apply it to your own individual circumstances in a way that suits you. So my biggest challenge in the portfolio office is influencing sufficiently to get everybody at a very senior level agreeing to a consistent way of working. And that's one of the things that is most tricky. But most of that, I think, comes down to education. And part of it, and what stopped us really progressing for the first 7.5 years, was the senior leaders' appetite for it. Because we have a real cultural shift with our new chief exec. And there comes a point where you look at your kind of chief exec, and if you've been banging your head against that wall for 7.5 years and they're not interested, don't want to know, there's only so far you can get with it. So some of it's about assessing the complexity of how you can get engagement with it. One of the things I think is worth kind of incentivizing, and it comes back to the training bit and apprenticeships and things that were mentioned. We were asked to do a guest lecture for clinical fellows. So these are clinicians who are on special training to support them with research and development, and as part of it they wanted a session on understanding project management, and that was great. And I think that this is really quite key, is that not just how do we look at encouraging core competencies in project management to be for everyone, but particularly clinicians, but also perhaps working with the other professional bodies. So working with the medical bodies, working with the the other clinical professional bodies to say, actually, your staff who are going into this need a certain level of understanding. So we've got the core skills online learning modules on e-learning for healthcare. And again, these are aimed at a kind of introductory level for everybody. So anybody who's starting out in it, but also if you wanted to have kind of project management 101, this is it. So about the NHS Projects and Change Academy program. So getting started in projects and change, the basic things about understanding what it is. So if you click on it, it will take you in, and it's about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on how much time you spend reading it and interacting with it. There's then one around project management, key ingredients for project success. Project leadership, the role of the senior responsible owner. We created that because we know not many of them have really had much training in it. What we haven't got is many people actually accessing it yet, other than the program and project managers who just get frustrated because their SROs don't know what they're doing. But it is actually useful for program and project managers to do that, because if you have a clear understanding of what your SRO should be doing, you can help nudge them in that direction. Thanks, Pam. She's put the link in the chat. And then introduction to benefits management and introduction to change management. So those are a good grounding, I think, for everybody, and whether you're professional or non-professional. But as a starting point for non-professionals to have a basic understanding, I think there should be mandatory training. So one of the things, if we had the time and the resource to be able to work on it more than we do at the moment, is actually then starting to partner with other professional bodies. Now, I've already talked to the Healthcare Finance Management Association and about what we can offer to their members in terms of giving them access to the core skills in project management, because a lot of finance people also need to interact with projects, whether it's around funding, whether it's around appraisals or cost estimating. A lot of finance professionals need to be involved in projects, and yet they're not trained in it, and yet this could help them. So he offered that as a quid pro quo in terms of, oh, well, if you give us access to your project management training for finance people, we'll give you access to our budget management training for your project people, because project managers need to manage budgets. So I think as a start, that would be a way that we could start to get that. We might have more of a challenge from the clinical professions understanding why it's important for them to, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. But there's something about promoting it locally within our own organisations and with our teams to promote the resources that are available to support people with developing those skills. In fact, in the capability framework, I'm sorry, I'm doing too much talking. We need to hear from you guys. In the capability framework, there is a whole section in terms of project skills for non-project professionals, because we acknowledge the fact that subject matter experts, SROs, specialists in other fields all need to interact with projects, and therefore we put in levels of competence for them as well. But part of it is about promoting it. So what are the other challenges? And is there anything in terms of somebody wants to share what's happening with their program, or challenges in their program, or lessons they've learned and things they'd like to share with others? Rachel, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about it from perspective of I've just because we weren't able to recruit anybody, I've just stepped in as the interim program manager for our pharmacy and medicines optimization program. And one of the big things that they've all been really shocked was I came in, and because I wasn't a pharmacist or a meds management person, I set about putting in a governance structure and what are we trying to deliver, and I've streamlined the work streams and sorted it all out. And they've all just been absolutely astounded at how much more efficiently everything's running already.
Yeah.
And I just think, but I can't go and be a program manager for everybody. So, but some people just need to see it, I think, to actually, they're totally converted now, and they totally get that it's a different skill set. But
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I was absolutely astounded, really, at the kind of response to it. Just because someone put a bit of order and structure into everything and made things make sense. It's yeah, but again, still no answers about how we make everybody have that moment.
No. One of the things that we're looking at is how programs and projects are initiated. Certainly things that require sort of funding and resourcing, and how that decision making is progressed, and how you turn. So we're looking at a project pipeline which says, okay, we've got this thing come up, there's a great idea, or ministers announced, or there's a thing come in, we've got to do this. It's going to take resources, it's going to take budget. We need to kind of work out how we're going to go about doing it. And what we do is we scope it out as a what we called a rapid response team, getting a few expert people together, finance, HR, PMO, along with a subject matter expert on that particular subject, all bringing together to do the scoping of it in the first place and working out what would need to be done to put it in place. Now, obviously, that's quite a change, because normally what happens is they go, oh, it's on nursing or it's on pharmacy, right? It's yours. You go do something with it. So there is a real cultural shift that we need to do around that. But that's a good example of where you've kind of gone in and supported that. Jane, you got a comment? Do you want to chat, or You're happy to post it.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt the flow there, Joe.
Yeah, go for it.
Absolutely, yeah. What you've said there is exactly what we're experiencing over in York, and it is that frustration. Absolutely, you start with that, and then you recognise that the only way to get through is to demonstrate both value and risk at the same time. You know, this is the value if you do this. This is the risk if you don't do this. And then people can start to listen and they can apply it to their own piece of the world that they're in charge of. And when it hits that and they feel a personal role, responsibility, or even accountability, that's when people start to listen. And we're starting to see that now, particularly within the Trust at York. As I said there in the chat, we've introduced a similar pipeline management process, which is, we know lots of changes need to happen, but we've got a very finite pool of developers who can do this from a systems perspective. So we've got to channel it in a way that not only assesses the need for the change, but then prioritises the change against all of the other changes that the Trust want at the same time. And that can only be done through a controlled mechanism, and it's painful. And people don't necessarily like being told no, but the exec have got to buy into supporting that prioritisation approach so that we will get round to doing most things, but some things will not get done, and we've got to adapt to that and recognise that. And then the impact assessment stage comes, like you say, when you bring those people together, all of those stakeholders who have got a voice and an opinion on, well, how do we do this change, and what does it cost us?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're doing at the moment, what we're doing at the moment, and it's starting to really just show some, sorry, I've got people working outside, I don't know if you can hear that background. And that's when it started to show some real benefits now. It's been painful, it's hard work, not everybody's buying into it yet, but it's starting to put it in a controlled environment, like Rachel said. It's structured and it makes sense, even if they don't necessarily like the answers.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think that's really critical, because, and the other thing is how it fits in with the other organizational functions. So we've been working with the digital team because they have an interest not only in digital product development, digital projects, but also services. And for me, one of the things about the pipeline is they either go into, you know, projects that are going to go into services, or they are incremental improvements in existing services that are managed internally. And to me, that then links to, you go, okay, what are the outcomes and what are the benefits?
Yeah.
So part of that's going, actually, those are the people that need to own it as part of service delivery. And when you look at the benefits, it's about the improvement to that service delivery over time, having put that change in place.
Exactly, yeah. And we've done that proving by engaging at a PMO level in purely just the digital area. We've proven the value of a PMO function at a very small scale with the control and governance and support. You know, it's not just negative, but the support that we can offer. And the value of that has now started to extrapolate out into the wider trust, in that our better care approach, which is the national drive to come out of the other side of COVID, is being set up as a programme with a blended role of SRO with subject matter experts from a clinical perspective, but project professionals to deliver as well. And that's where we're proving ourselves, and hopefully we'll be implementing a trust-wide PMO function to support that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. Anybody else? I'm mindful we've only got 3 minutes left. That time flew by. That was me talking too much, wasn't it? Anybody else? Stick your hands up if you want to add any comments. Get your thoughts across.
I think it's been a really insightful conversation. I mean, I've been noting a few bits down that actually really resonate with me. I'm a subject matter expert, and I was thrown into the world of projects. So I did do the Project and Change Academy core skills, and I now recommend every new member of staff that comes in to look at this, because I know that part of their role is going to be projects and programs. So that's been really good. I was going to say, if you're not on our distribution list, if you drop NHS Project Futures an email to be popped onto that distribution list, and if there's anything you'd want to follow up on from today's session, do pop it into an email. I'm just very conscious that we've got about 3 minutes.
Yeah. I think the one thing we haven't kind of touched on yet is about that who and how all of this is facilitated within the organisation. One of the things I've learned the hard way was to shift what we do from bringing project police as the corporate portfolio function to project and program facilitators and coaches. And that was about having sufficient resource to actually work with the teams directly, help them, support them get set up, help them with, getting the governance right, help them with getting the roles right, help them getting their training and development sorted. And that holistic view has really transformed some of the key programs. We haven't had the capacity to work on all of them, but some of them you can see a really massive difference. So I think, Rachel's session around coaching this afternoon, start to think about that, both for ourselves and then how we can work with others in coaching as well. Some really great insights. Thank you so much, everybody. And I think some things to follow up on. So I think we can do something around the maturity sessions and look at examples of where people have developed maturity in some of the areas. And also perhaps follow up on the sort of project initiation pipeline, as well as something around maybe just sort of around the training and development options, because that was mentioned as well. What's the plethora of things that are out there for people to sort of tap into?